How to Go Independent, episode 14. Thanks so much for joining me today. I've got another interview for this episode, this time with Matt Sonnen, who is the founder of PFI Advisors. PFI, as you'll hear, stands for Pure Financial Independence. We didn't get into the title of the firm beyond the initials until about midway through. That was my oversight. But I found out about Matt by reading about him in the industry trade publications with the announcement of his new business here in January, just a few months ago. And I found it very interesting because Matt's niche, as you'll hear more about, is helping teams with $1 billion or more assets under management set up their own independent RIA. And what's unique about Matt's firm, about PFI, is they only do the transition services, and therefore the benefit to the new firm, other than the great help they get, is they're not paying someone in an ongoing fashion. And as you'll hear Matt articulate, he's very passionate about the idea that at that size they can do it all themselves, and so that's his target market. So a big reason I wanted to have him on the show was to illustrate that at all size and scale of a business, there is probably a great independent option. I think a lot of people in our business have somehow gotten the notion that only at the lower end of the production and business scale does independence make sense. And maybe that was true 20, 30 years ago, but with the way technology has evolved, there is no doubt there's a proliferation of options, and Matt talks about that as well. So I hope you enjoy the interview. A lot of great information. Matt's got a very interesting background as it relates to the independent space, but he also has worked at some of the biggest names in the industry as well. So without further ado, here's the interview with Matt Sonnen. Well, today I'm talking to Matt Sonnen, who has got a business helping advisors go independent at the very high end of the marketplace. So, Matt, thanks for joining me today.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And why don't we dive right in and kind of get to talking about your background and kind of how you got to where you are in terms of your family and your business background, whatever else you'd like to share with the audience.
Sure. So my wife and I are both California natives. We spent 2.5 years in New York City recently when I was working for Focus Financial Partners. While we were there, we had 2 kids. We were living in a shoebox in Manhattan and wanted to get back to Southern California. So back in July last year, I resigned from Focus. We moved back to Southern California, and we started PFI Advisors together. Our son Luke is just about to turn 3. He's on our website as our Director of Transition Amusement.
Yeah,
cool. He traveled with us when we were at Focus. He was on site at a couple different breakaways, and he's great during that stressful weekend to bring on site and calm everybody down. It gets a little tense. So we've got him on the website, and then we've got a daughter, Layla, who is going to turn 1 in a couple of weeks.
Great. And then, what did you guys do? You kind of mentioned Focus, but what did you do before you kind of broke away on your own, so to speak, and started the business?
So my claim to fame is always going to be Luminous Capital. That was a large breakaway in Southern California. We left Merrill Lynch in 2008 with $1.7 billion, and I had worked with those guys at Merrill from 97 to 2005. They had just joined Merrill from Goldman Sachs, and at the time, those 4 advisors were doing more business than the entire Beverly Hills branch. So from an operations perspective, the branch had doubled in size overnight, and so they hired me right out of school to be their operations point person just to help them navigate Mother Merrill. So who do you call for an options trade? How do you place a mutual fund trade? That sort of thing. So that was my first job, and then I kind of zigged and zagged my way, my career path with those guys up through 2005. I was partner in the business, but I didn't have any business development responsibilities. My job was to be chained to the desk to service the existing clients, so they knew while the other guys were out prospecting or doing client meetings, that sort of thing, I could help them with their portfolio and that sort of thing. So I left in 2005 to try my hand at selling insurance, which I did not enjoy. But I stayed in close contact with them. So then in 2007, they contacted me and said, hey, we're finally going to start our own firm, but we have no idea how the RIA space works. can you go figure it out while we keep our head down and just focus on our clients? So I built out a San Francisco office and a Los Angeles office with technology and furniture and all of that stuff, and then just sort of figured out how the RIA space worked, so custodian and compliance and that sort of thing. So I spent about 7 months doing that, and then in May of '08, then they snuck out with $1.7 billion. We grew it very quickly. I stayed on as the COO, CCO for the 4.5-year run up to $6 billion of assets, and then they sold it to First Republic Bank. And I really enjoyed the independent side. I wanted to stay in the independent space. So literally the day the press hit that Luminous sells to First Republic, then my resume was at Focus Financial saying, you're one of the largest players in the independent space. Can you rescue me? So we moved it to New York, and I was in charge of breakaway teams trying to set up their own firms. And then when there wasn't a breakaway going on, I would do various operations and technology projects for the existing firms in their portfolio.
Excellent. And backing up a little bit to when they called you, I guess in '07, was
Yep.
that a surprise to you about the fact that they would be starting their own firm? You used the word finally, but was that something that surprised you, or was it kind of like, oh yeah, it's about time, or what was your kind of reaction from knowing those guys?
Yeah, they always, and I didn't appreciate that. I thought everybody had that mentality in the wirehouses. They always knew they were going to start their own firm at some point. It was just a matter of when.
Gotcha.
So yeah, it was for me. It was kind of finally. Oh, you're finally going to do this. Great, let's get going.
Right. Well, that's interesting. Obviously, I could see the benefits, and I've read about that. I mean, it's well documented. It's pretty big deal. Both when they left and when they the transaction was pretty significant to
Yes.
First Republic. I assume you weren't necessarily an equity partner or nothing to make you sail off into the sunset completely, huh?
Exactly. I didn't get to go live on the beach, but I did have 0.0000001%. So I got
nice.
It was a nice handshake.
Good. Well, that helps. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
That's neat. Well, I think it's interesting as we'll get into your current business, the fact that obviously they knew and trusted you, which I'm continually surprised, or not surprised anymore, but no matter how big these businesses are, that these guys that you worked with and that you helped build the business, they didn't rely, or first of all, there probably wasn't anybody that at the time that had already done this for large $1 billion, $1.7 billion teams to start something from scratch, or at least none they trusted or found. So it's interesting that that was your sort of your trial by fire from what I've read, and I'm sure we'll talk about.
Yep.
But it's interesting to hear that, hey, if they trusted you to figure stuff out, and long story short, you got it done.
Yes, exactly.
So then what? I think you've kind of led into it, but so what's prompted you to start PFI Advisors, and tell me a little bit more about that decision making.
Yeah. So at Focus, we were meeting with large teams, and it just felt over and over again, and especially on the larger end, these advisors would hear the presentation, and they would say, well, this sounds fantastic. I think you would set up my office space for me, so I don't even have to think about that. I resign and come in, and everything's going to work. So I'm confident that's going to happen. I'm confident you're going to advise me on the best technology solutions, and how do I offer the same products and services I always have within the wirehouse. And I think you'll get me set up there. I think you'll help me transition the clients, and the clients are going to come over. I'm very confident with that. And you're just going to educate me on how to run this business. So all of that sounds great. But what I don't like about the Focus model is you're asking me to sell equity on day one. And even if you've had a 25-year career at Merrill Lynch, everybody kind of thinks of Independence Day as their rebirth, and it's day one. So it was just sort of, in my mind, it was kind of a flaw in the model. And so I kept hearing it over and over again. We just really need help getting set up. Once you get over that $1 billion mark, I feel, and again, I saw it firsthand at Luminous, you have the scale to do this on your own. You can pick up the phone and call any asset manager you need and say, hi, I represent $2 billion. I would love to work with you. And they will be in your office the next day. Talking to the technology vendors without a whole lot of negotiating, you're going to say, I have $2 billion. You're going to hit the low price point of their tier, right?
Right.
So you don't really need all this leverage from these national platforms. So it just, I kept Googling it, thinking, well, someone must be offering just transition services, and I couldn't find it. There's a lot of breakaway solutions, a lot out there, but a lot are W-2 models. Just join us and open up a branch office for XYZ. We're either a large RIA or a large platform of some kind. So that's a W-2 model. There's others like Focus that are saying, well, you need to sell equity on day one, and people don't like that. And then there's others that are charging on an AUM basis. They lock you into a multi-year contract, and that doesn't work for some of the large teams because they may have institutional clients. They've got a lot of assets, but there's not that many clients. And so to charge them based on the AUM is tough. So I thought, well, let's just build a consulting firm for a flat fee, just a consulting fee. We'll just do transition services. We're not going to offer an investment platform, all the stuff that I don't think these guys really need. They just need the transition services. So that was sort of the aha moment for PFI advisors is I think on the high end, that's all they need, and I didn't seem like anyone was offering that to these guys.
Yeah, that makes sense because I haven't dealt with a lot of billion-dollar-plus teams, multi-billion-dollar teams, but generally speaking, I noticed that as you move up this production business scale, if advisors teams are able to build that kind of business, they can run a business. I mean, they can figure that stuff out. If they can figure out how to create relationships with that kind of size, they obviously can either figure it out or find the right people to figure it out. They know what they're doing for the most part. So they need a guide more than someone to babysit them indefinitely.
Correct. Exactly. That's a good way to put it. Yep.
Very interesting. I would assume, we'll get on that in a bit here. So, well, actually, let me touch on it now. So I would assume someone that's looking at that kind of transition, it's a pretty significant decision. It's going to be well thought out. It's not hey, they take me off on Monday, I'm going to quit on Friday. What kind of cycle do you see in terms of people making that planning to start their own thing, and especially the kind of people you would want to work with?
So the real estate is going to be the biggest question mark, depending on if you find a completely raw space that you actually have to tell them where to put the walls and put the plugs and everything. That build out could really throw a wrench. Hopefully you can find it was a law office, and most of the stuff is there. You just have to, hey, we want our conference room a little bigger or a little smaller, so you're just moving a couple interior walls. So that's the biggest thing the biggest component of the timeline pre-resignation. But I would say 3 months pre-resignation is about what it takes. You want to interview a few custodians. You want to talk to a few reporting providers, and I think we do a good job of narrowing those choices down. When I did this in 2008 for Luminous, there weren't that many choices. It was a little bit easier. Now, because independence has been so successful, and so many advisors are making this move, there's a lot of vendors now offering services. So it's a little bit overwhelming for these guys to look at the number of choices. So we'll talk to them about the type of business they have, the type of clients they have, and we can narrow down a lot of their choices. Really, we try to just show them 2 of everything and help them make that decision so that this doesn't wind up being a 9-month, 12-month pre-resignation process, because it's just they have a day job. They're trying to manage a business, so they don't want to spend too much time making all these decisions. So I would say 3 months on the short end, and then just the big question mark is the real estate.
Gotcha. That's very interesting. I would have thought it would have been longer, but I guess you have a lot of resources on these kinds of teams.
Yes.
And if you're engaging a consultant like you guys, you can get a lot done in a fairly short amount of time if someone on the team and you guys are focused on that process.
Exactly.
Gotcha. What is it about independence you think attracts advisors, and why has there been the movement out of the wirehouses? And I will caveat that or add to it. I always kind of chuckle at the one-off stories about some independent advisor somewhere going back to a wirehouse.
Yep.
And if they did the math on the flow, it's generally a one-way street, right? So how would you explain that trend?
So it is nerve-wracking and difficult to run your own firm, for sure. There is something to be said for showing up every day at Wells Fargo or Morgan Stanley, whatever it is, and your computer works, and there is a compliance department, and everything's sort of taken care of for you, and there's a constant stream of products that you can show your clients, and there's research and things. So I get it why people would say, well, I'm just going to stay here. I'm not going to rock the boat. But I think for a lot of advisors, there just comes a breaking point where they say enough is enough. They think, well, I'm going to create a few headaches by running my own firm, but that far outweighs the headaches I'm going to avoid. So I'm no longer going to be placed in this tight compliance box where these people are saying, well, you can't offer that to your clients because we don't allow all of our advisors to offer that to clients. And that's very frustrating. That was one of the big things for the Luminous guys, is they had certain small managers that they wanted to show their clients, and they were just told by management, no, they're not on our quote platform. So that's frustrating.
Kind of the lowest common denominator treatment.
Exactly. Yes. Most of these firms are public companies, so they've got quarterly earnings announcements, so there's always headline risk. Especially, obviously in '08, there was, all this investment banking stuff and the products and things. It was just, it used to be that logo helped you, and it just over the last several years, it feels like that sometimes is hurting you. So they always have to worry about the headline risk of their firm. Compensation is always huge, right? It seems every year they're revamping the production grid, and it never seems to be in favor of the advisors. So that just finally, they hit a breaking point. They don't get any operating leverage. You're kind of an independent contractor within the wirehouses, but you're on that fixed payout. So every new dollar you bring in, as you get economies of scale, your profit margin should go up, but they're just on this set, I get 42% payout, and that drives people nuts. They say, well, geez, as I grow from 500 million to $1 billion, my profit margin should be increasing, but you don't get that within the wirehouses. So
you don't see any difference, because I see that at the lower end. It's kind of life changing at the very basic income level, but it's interesting to hear that you see that from the larger teams that, they're probably making a pretty good income, but it's still, as a business person, it sounds like it drives them a little crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the technology has improved so much on the independent side that you can really, for, relatively speaking, for the size of your firm, you can, for pretty cheap, you can offer the same client experience that they can in the wirehouses. So it's not that expensive to set this stuff up. And then again, to get the economies of scale and the operating leverage, and then to have this asset that you can sell or pass on to your family or whatever is very valuable.
Gotcha. Okay, I'm sorry I interrupt you. Any other pieces that you think would be important to that?
No, I think that's it. I think the technology improvements have really been the game changer.
Gotcha.
They were, it used to be, oh, geez, you can't go independent because you're not going to be able to offer the same stuff. But now that, you get the client portal and the custodians are great with the online banking, and your clients can take pictures of their checks and deposit it. So you get, as an independent RIA, you can offer the same client experience that they're getting from Merrill Lynch or Morgan Stanley, whatever.
Yeah, I'm sure not too long ago. I've been independent since '09 and in the business since '02, and even since '09, you could see the ease of use of some of the tools that I use. And 15, 20 years ago, Merrill Lynch or Morgan Stanley, Smith Barney did have better technology. You had to have like you said, the huge investment in it, but that is continually going down. So that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Okay, one thing that I found as I started to poke around, learning that there was this independent kind of model at all when I started in the industry, I could tell there was a perception that, at least among some people, that sort of going independent is only for the people who have kind of failed out in the wirehouses. What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I didn't know that was the thought until we launched Luminous, and what opened my eyes was RIA Biz had run a big 3-part series on the founding of Luminous Capital, and they mentioned it in that article, and that was the first time I had heard of it. But they said this is a game changer. You have $1.7 billion breakaway is now proving that independence is really a legitimate landing spot. So that was in '08. But now, I mean, you think of there's so many large firms leading this industry now. Colony Group is in Boston. They just had their 30th anniversary. They're managing over $5 billion. Savant Capital Management's in Chicago. They manage over $4 billion. Gupta Wealth Management's here in Southern California. They broke away, I think, of like $500 million, and they've doubled, if not more than that. They're tied up with Tony Robbins now. So they are growing rapidly. Halbert Hargrove is another Southern California firm, 30 years history and manages over $4 billion. So I think it's proven itself that these are real businesses now, not just practices. And then just the M&A transactions that have taken place over the last couple of years, you can see that real money can be made. Bel Air Advisors sold to a Canadian bank. Baker Street sold to AMG. Constellation Wealth sold to First Republic. And they keep saying this M&A activity and the private equity is just going to keep piling into the industry. So that's more legitimization of the industry. And then the breakaways are just the size of the breakaways are becoming incredible. Last year alone there was two really big ones. Summit Trail was multi-offices, multi-billion. Corient Capital here in Orange County, they're multi-billion. It came out of Merrill Lynch. So the size of the breakaways are getting larger. The size of the transactions are getting larger. And just, it's become a legitimate place for money management.
Yeah, it's interesting with the M&A stuff that, I think some advisors that have built a nice business that if they were to make a change, they're going to get paid handsomely to stay in the wirehouse channel. It's good for them to hear that, other people do have money besides Merrill Lynch, Morgan Stanley,
exactly.
Wells Fargo, UBS. I mean, other people can banks like First Republic as an example.
Yep.
They can make significant investments if they see the right opportunity.
Absolutely.
Okay, and there's been a lot of debate, especially there was an article recently in Investment News, and then I think a rebuttal to that same article by Danny Sarch, the recruiter, about retention rates. This was specifically about Merrill talking about how they keep, you actually, I think we talked about that off air, so to speak. Kind of what's your experience and what kind of retention rate do you see people keeping, both from what you've seen directly and then kind of what the other people you talk to?
Yeah, the article you're referencing, it was saying Merrill Lynch claimed that they held as much as 50%. On average, the average breakaway, we keep 50% of the assets when they go. And like I said, Danny Sarch had to do a rebuttal because there was a lot of speculation. Those numbers just aren't that's just not accurate. So that was the first article I'd seen with numbers that low. Most often I hear 80% thrown out there, and I still think that's too low. I think that 80% number includes wirehouse to wirehouse changes. So it's not just people going independent, but it's a Morgan Stanley move over to UBS or a UBS move to Merrill Lynch. Obviously, I'm totally biased. I wave the independent flag very strongly, but as an end client, I don't know why you would move from Morgan Stanley to UBS and have to go through just all the hassle of repapering and resetting up your bill pay accounts and everything. It just feels like one feels very similar to the other, and I don't quite get it as the end client what I'm picking up. So that 80% number probably is accurate if you're counting every movement of an advisor. I think if you're going from the wirehouse world to independence, either setting up your own shop or joining an existing RIA, the numbers I usually see are well north of 90% because most of the time client fees and expenses are going to be reduced. The advisor will have this much, much larger universe of investments they can offer because, again, they're not put in that compliance box. So you can tell the client, I have more ability to show you interesting, diversifying products and services that I ever could show you. A lot of these clients for these advisors, the clients themselves are entrepreneurs. They really get excited when the advisor says, I'm starting my own firm. So I think it's well north of 90%. I guess the caveat is it's 90% of what the advisor wanted to bring. They use going independent as a client segmentation exercise. So they go through their book and they say, well, these clients just don't make sense in my new model. These clients, so they're going with their more profitable clients, and they don't always invite clients to come with them. So I think that throws these retention numbers off a little bit too. But I have found in any of the deals that I've been involved with, either obviously the Luminous deal or any of the deals we did at Focus Financial, it's well north of 90 of what they actually wanted to bring.
Yeah, that makes sense. And there's other dynamics at play. Have you seen the kind of the consolidation effect, where if I'm moving this stuff, I might as well move this other stuff now that I've worked with you for X number of years, or that sort of discussion with a client?
As far as picking up more wallet share, is that what you're saying of the client?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So it's, and especially again for those entrepreneurial clients that have sold a business and that's where they got their wealth. They say, oh man, I never felt comfortable referring my friends to you at XYZ Wirehouse, whatever it was. But now that you're your own firm, these are some referrals I've been sitting on, just never sent you. So that definitely happens. And then it's, oh, and by the way, of my own money, I never even told you I had another account, another advisor. But let me send this to you now. So I see it every time that the just the fact they've started their own firm, they've gone into the independent channel, the client assets go up.
Yeah, I've noticed that anecdotally as well, and personally that at a very, very much smaller scale, but for every one or two surprises that clients that you don't retain, it seems to me that you pick up a similar amount of assets from your clients who say, yeah, I'm with you, I'm doubling down on our relationship essentially by adding to it. So you sort of end up with a higher quality outcome because you've got roughly same assets and maybe one or two fewer relationships, and I figure that's moving the needle in a good way, that your average household relationship has just gone up a little bit.
Absolutely, yes.
Gotcha. Well, tell me, you've obviously been there and done that in this part of the industry, but how would you describe your firm being different from all the other options that I think you mentioned before we hit record? There's a lot of options. That's one thing I wanted to bring to the world was not only are there a lot of options, but there are a lot of great options. So,
absolutely.
Why don't you touch on some of those, and then kind of how does your firm kind of try to set yourselves apart from all the other great options out there?
Sure. Yeah. As we said, as independence has grown and really shown that it can be a legitimate landing spot for advisors. Obviously, money follows. People follow the money, and so there are a lot of solutions out there. Some are W-2 models, so you're just joining their firm. Others are plug-and-play solutions. There's quite a few of those that for the advisor that wants to be independent but just doesn't quite have enough revenue to support the real estate costs, the salaries of employees, the compliance costs, the technology costs, et cetera. There's some very good plug-and-play solutions out there. Where we have differentiated ourselves is, I think, and we've got a white paper actually coming out in another week or so to talk about where the economics of these models breaks down, I feel, above $1 billion. It becomes too expensive for the large AUM firms. So that's where we're swimming, is we focus on the $1 billion or larger firms. We're not asking for any equity. We don't charge on an AUM basis. We don't do a multi-year contract. So it's just a consulting fee, a one-time consulting fee paid after resignation. And we just offer transition services. Again, these large teams, I think that's all they need. So we will do the business infrastructure, which is the office space and the hanging of the TVs in the conference room and the furniture and the phone systems and the computer systems. We'll set up the RIA infrastructure. So again, talking to them, figuring out what their business model is, what services they want to offer, and then helping them determine what technology fits that. Everybody gets sold on an expensive trading system, and when you talk to them, many times they don't run models, so they don't really need a standalone trading system. So we help them pick technology, but a lot of times we're actually telling them you don't need certain technologies.
Right.
If they're just entering mutual fund trades, you can enter that right through the custodian. You don't need a big aggregating trading tool.
And they don't necessarily know what they don't know, no matter how successful they are, right?
Exactly, and they've been brainwashed. by their branch manager, saying, my God, don't go independent. You're a great investment guy, but you've never run a firm. You're going to be stuck under your desk trying to get your computer to work while the markets are volatile, and you're going to lose all your clients because you're not going to have your eye on the ball. So we educate them through this whole process and show them that it's not as difficult as they've been told, that the technology is there and that they can do it. We also we go on site with the custodians during transition. We'll be there for several weeks, if not months, helping them move the clients and to go through that whole paperwork process. And then we help them on their billing. Advisors, they're high-fiving each other saying, wow, 95% of our clients have come over with a huge success. And I say, congratulations, that's amazing. How are you going to get paid? And they say, I have no idea. We've been throwing the client agreements in the corner as they've been getting signed. We don't know. And so our team will actually take those client agreements, we'll load up all those fee rates into the billing software, and then when they hit submit to the custodian to actually debit the client accounts to pay them, that's sort of the end of our project. Some firms have said, we're still not ready to cut the cord, we don't want you to leave, so we'll stick around on a retainer basis after that. But I keep telling them in the beginning of this process, I say, I know you're scared and you don't know what you don't know. I'm telling you, as we go through this over the next several months, I'm going to get you educated. You're not going to need me as badly as you think you do, but we definitely offer retainer services to stick around for another quarter or so to help them get set up. So I think that's really what makes us different is we're doing it for a consulting fee, and it's not equity or AUM based. That's
great. Yeah. So the scale that they've achieved, they don't have to share that with you as a service provider. No matter how valuable you are, that they've created the scale, so they're not going to.
Correct.
You're not going to ride along sort of like some of these other aggregators, or
exactly.
Heck, we have a model in the network I run. We get paid on percentage of production over time,
yep.
And that's a great business model for us. But I can see why at a certain size people would say, no, I don't really need. Your compliance value doesn't go up necessarily as my business grows.
Correct.
Gotcha. I had a couple quick follow-up questions on that. You had mentioned kind of the W-2 option. Can you give me a sense of why would someone at this scale pick that? I know they're, put on your sales hat for that model. Kind of what are the pros and cons? Why would someone consider the W-2 model at this size?
I think they just say, I just don't want to be a business owner. And literally growing up, I was 22 years old when I met those Luminous Capital guys. Growing up with them, I just thought everybody wanted to be a business owner. But as I've met more and more advisors, I get it. Not everybody wants to run their own firm. So they say, look, right. I show up, I don't have to think about it, the computers are going to work, and I don't want to deal with compliance. As much of a hassle as it may be to deal with the compliance department, I just, I don't want to wear that hat. So they just say, let me plug and play, let me just show up to work and deal with my clients. Gotcha.
And, this is a very simplified version, so you can tell me if it's way off. But my take on what I've read and thinking through that is some of those options are great because they're going to have a higher payout and probably some equity in the larger organization. But when it comes down to it, they're going to morph probably to look like a, kind of a souped-up wirehouse,
yep.
For lack of a better term, right? Because you're going to have some of the organizational challenges of not being able to do it your way sooner or later, right?
Absolutely. Yes, sort of I think they will hit that breaking point at some point. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. But I can see how it's an improvement over the existing wirehouse model. Yeah. So I guess it takes all kinds, and that's another benefit of the kind of the entrepreneurial place we live. That there's always someone who's going to create a model to kind of suit whatever need there is or perceived need. Okay, great. And the other the other question I had for you was kind of about your timeline, and then I guess that's two more questions. One about kind of that timeline. Sounds like that's not a really super long period of time that you work with these people to get up and running, which is great to hear for those that are much smaller than $1 billion, but maybe you're thinking this is going to take so much downtime out of their business. So that's one question. And the other one is kind of what's the custodian's involvement when you're setting up an RIA? Clearly, they're probably not providing anything close to what you do. That's why the business opportunity is there. But, what do they do? What's helpful, and where do you overlap with them, and kind of how does that work?
Sure. So on the timeline, I think it's give or take around 3 months. if they're really getting creative with their real estate, it may be a little bit longer than that pre-resignation. And then we're probably engaged for another 3 months post-resignation, so that you've got that client transition time, and then, to get them through that first quarterly billing and everything. So it's probably about 6 months, 7 months that we're working with these guys to get their firm up and running. The custodians they do an amazing job during transition. So they will send people on site and help with kind of QCing the paperwork and getting things open as quickly as possible. Obviously, I always compare it to the big Jerry Maguire moment when they fired him at the restaurant, and then they ran across,
Yep.
and then start calling all the clients. Everybody has to go through that when they start their own RIA, and so the custodians are there to make that client transition as quickly as possible, but then also getting it done correctly the first time. So it's a lot of paperwork. Wirehouse advisors get frustrated. Even on the good transitions, they do get frustrated with the custodian just because it's very different. The custodian is a completely different company. You're not wearing the same, you don't have the same business card. So you need a signature for everything. You want to add checks to an account. Many times in the wirehouse, that's just a phone call, right? You say, oh, sure, no problem, we'll add that. In the independent space with an independent custodian, you're going to need client to sign something to add checks to an account. To get third-party wires sent out always requires a signature. So there's definitely some changes to how you interact with your custodian in the independent space versus your back office in the wirehouse world. So that's one of the values that I think we add, is we do a good job of setting everybody's expectations and kind of playing marriage counselor during that stressful time. But they will get all of that paperwork filled out with protocol data. So just names, addresses. They can't put social security numbers on there. They can't have dates of birth, anything like that. But they will get that paperwork filled out almost virtually overnight. When you resign, you give them just contact information of your clients, and they will fill in all of that household data and get it packaged for you and get it shipped off to the clients very quickly so that it can get returned and get the accounts open and the assets start moving as quickly as possible. So they've got this buttoned down really well to moving those assets very quickly.
Gotcha. That makes sense. You've written some about the challenges that breakaway firms face when they're trying to figure out the office space. Like you said, that's the biggest moving part. Do you have any particular advice about people that are looking to do their own RIA and how to handle that?
So the biggest challenge everybody has with office space is you're worried that clients are going to think of you as a startup, right? That they're worried. I've never heard of whatever you've named this firm 10 minutes ago. Are my assets going to be safe? So you can tell them about the custodian and how the assets are not with your RIA, et cetera. But then on office space, in their mind, they're competing with the branch office. Everything's mahogany and everything's very nice when you walk into a Wells Fargo branch. And so there's two kind of thought processes. One is, let's just get this started as quickly as possible. Let's throw a couple trading desks in the middle of the room and get up and started. That's actually what we did at Luminous. We literally forgot to paint the walls for the first 6 months. Somebody's wife finally came in and said, this place looks awful. And oh my God, I guess we should throw some paint on the walls. We just were thinking about, the clients and the assets, et cetera, and we didn't really think of it. Other advisors during this breakaway transition, they say, look, on day one, when I bring clients in here to sign their paperwork, this has to look competitive to a branch office, and they want statues and they want it to look really nice. I've actually built a fireplace in somebody's lobby for them, so I've seen it every which way. And I get that mentality. I totally get it, why they think that way. But so there's two ways you can do it. The biggest mistake we made with Luminous is in, again, trying to sort of compete with that thought process of, well, I don't want to look like a startup. We thought, well, let's put our office in the same building as the Merrill Lynch office, just so clients can come to the same building and they'll get it. But that just made the build out, those pre-resignation months, a complete nightmare. I do not recommend putting your office in the same building as wherever you're leaving.
So did that come to, I guess nothing bad happened in terms of the prep, but that was, I guess, stressful for you in particular, I would think.
Yeah, we pulled it off, but it was. It's added stress. You don't need pre-resignation. Find another building somewhere close, and you can tell people I'm just right down the street from the old office. But yeah, it was just undue stress we didn't need.
Gotcha. So as your business has kind of evolved in the last, I guess, year or so, as you've gotten set up, kind of how have you organized it, and what kind of team do you have in place to help people go through this process?
Yeah, so we're struggling with the same thing every entrepreneur does, right? Do you scale first? Do you need the clients first, or do you want to scale up and figuring out how best to spend the money and everything? So we're lean and mean right now. My wife and I are the owners of the firm. We've obviously been talking about my background. My wife was an AXA advisor, so she knows the industry very well. She has some great operations experience as well. So she's the COO of PFI, and she really runs the firm. So I just deal with the clients, and I don't have to think about running of our firm at all. And she has some great knowledge that she passes on to the firms that are setting up their business from a technology perspective, et cetera. And then our analyst, Ana Maria Garcia, came with me from Focus. We met at Focus. She had worked there. Her and I did a couple breakaways together, and we had done several of these kind of ops and tech projects at the existing Focus firm. So she's been great. She did the opposite. My wife and I are born and raised in California, moved to New York for the Focus job. Anna's from the East Coast and has come to California for this job. But we work very well together, and she saved many, many months of setting up the firm just because we speak the same language, and we had that history together. And then I've got a couple transition specialists, I'll call them, earmarked that I can hire very quickly as we start to scale this thing. They were honest with me and said, look, I'm not an entrepreneur. I want a paycheck 2 weeks after I start. And I said, we're still building this thing. Let me get a few more deals under our belt and get a little more cash flow, and then we can hire you as an employee. So we will scale this thing in the right way.
Yeah, that's one of the things you see it more as you're on your own, that you have to get the right people, but you have to make sure that you can keep them engaged. But you typically want to be slightly ahead of the curve, yep. So it's good to know where you're going to get them.
The chicken and the egg problem. Yes. Do I hire first, or do I get the clients first? Yes. Yeah.
And you want the people that you have in mind. Hopefully they haven't gone on to some other opportunity they don't want to leave. Hopefully they're ready when you're ready for them. But it's always good to be talking to quality people.
Absolutely.
Great. How do you guys? First of all, let me back up a second, quite a few seconds. I think we've said PFI. Can you tell me what PFI stands for and kind of how you came up with the name?
Yeah, sorry, we should have done that right off the bat. So again, our when you're looking at the flavors of independence and the W-2 model and the platform, the plug-and-play model, et cetera, our model, as we were sort of figuring this out, we say, well, we're really pure independence. So we came up with PFI, pure financial independence, because that's sort of what we represent, is somebody that really wants to be their 100% owner of their firm, isn't thrown off by the, oh, geez, this is going to be a pain to run my own firm. So pure financial independence is what PFI stands for, because we figured that describes our section of the independence model.
Yeah, I think that's a great name. It really kind of distills, because if people don't get that right off, it's, well, what does that mean? And that's a great conversation starter, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. How much time and how do you go about helping people with, you had referenced it earlier, all the different sort of technology options and tools available? I think a lot of advisors or entrepreneurs in general that are doing this, they want to have control and look at all the different choices. But how do you streamline that, and how is that received by your prospects and clients?
Yeah, that really runs the gamut. So based on their personality, some say, just set me up, just get me the best stuff. I don't want to deal with this. Again, I'm dealing with my clients. I'm running a business within Wells Fargo, whatever it is. Just get the thing set up. And others are more kind of tech savvy. That's sort of a hobby of theirs. They really want to see everything that's out there. So we'll do both, but we try to make it as less stressful as possible and not overwhelm them with choices. There's so many psychology reports about, if you're in the cereal aisle and there's just so many boxes, you wind up not buying anything. You can't make a choice at all, and you just leave the aisle completely. So we try to limit the number of choices, and we really get to know their business and what they want the new business to look like. And so if they're working with certain products or services, some technologies work better than others. So we will tell them, look, based on your business model, these don't even make sense. Let's just look at these choices over here. Or, you really need to look at this, or you just need a very basic trading system, or you need a very robust, system depending on how they run their business. So we work with both. We'll show them everything if they want, but most of the time it's hey, can you just limit the number of choices that we have to look at and get it set up correctly?
Yeah, that seems like that would be wise, because it's always, of course there's a switching cost, but these firms can always redeploy a separate tool or technology they want
Absolutely.
to. A lot easier to change that down the road than to change, while you're changing everything,
right.
creating something from scratch. Very good. Let's see. Any other, you've touched on a lot of the things that you think people should focus on. Any other specific advice for, as people kind of going from being an employee to more the entrepreneur, the business owner, advice for those that are having a hard time balancing working on the business versus in the business, and kind of the implications of that change?
Yeah, I think especially the firms on the large end, they want they're the same thing I was just talking about. Of you don't want to spend too much money right off the bat. You want to make sure you get your clients and the assets moved over, et cetera. So they will name one of their existing partners the COO, CCO during transition, which is fine. But these large firms, by 12 months out, they're going to want to hire a standalone person not in charge of business development. You want your business development people focused on what they do best, and they should be out gathering new assets. But you need somebody that's going to run the business for you. And even with my tiny firm, again, I have my wife doing it for me. I don't want to have to get bogged down with that stuff. So they are going to need to hire a CCO, COO. That was my role at Luminous, so I'm somewhat biased, but I think that role is very, very critical for these large teams. Let them deal with the clients and business development, and have somebody else who's just dealing with HR and technology, compliance, et cetera.
Yeah, I think that it speaks highly of you that you're walking the walk now that you're calling the shots, and you're probably not to the scale that Luminous was, for example, but you're building it from the ground up with that structure, instead of, even though you've done it, you're not putting yourself in that job. You're playing
Correct.
the CEO role, which is different.
Correct.
Very good. Any other major costs, issues, or risks that you think people should think about that we haven't covered, so far?
We touched on it. The three biggest costs for any RIA, regardless of size, is going to be your real estate, your human capital, and your technology. And all three are going to be dependent on the number of employees you have. Obviously, the more employees, you'll need a larger real estate space, and that's going to obviously be a higher cost. And then you're going to probably sign, to get the best rate on your lease, you're going to want to sign a 5 to 7 year lease. So you're going to want to leave some room for growth. Hopefully you've got some pretty aggressive growth plans, and so you're going to have more offices than you need to begin with. But your number of employees will determine, obviously, salaries will be higher with the number of employees, and then technology. A lot of the technology is charged based on the number of accounts you have. Others are billed on an AUM basis, and then others are just on a per license basis. So more employees means more cost for like a CRM system, et cetera. So it's all dependent on the number of employees, but those are your three big costs you got to keep in mind.
Gotcha. That sounds like pretty straightforward across, like you said, at any size, really.
Yeah.
And that goes from the smallest, hybrid RIA, independent broker-dealer rep, to kind of the size and scale of these businesses that you're talking about, helping. It's just a matter of making sure it fits. Yep. So, as I like to say, it's not rocket surgery in some ways.
Yeah.
What would you say is the biggest challenge advisors tell you that they face as they're going independent and setting up the firm and kind of remaining independent?
We've talked about a lot of them. It's just the running of a firm. You're dealing with things you've never even thought of before. HR issues. You've got to offer benefits for your employees. You've got to have a 401k plan now to offer your employees. So these things you just never had to think about before. I obviously feel the benefits far outweigh the negatives in running your own firm, and I think advisors do agree. As we've been talking about, there's a lot of people making this change. Every single breakaway that I've been a part of has said, they all say the same thing, and that I wish I had done this sooner. It is a lot of work, but I wish I had done this sooner. I'm having the time of my life, and this has just been so much fun, and I'm reinvigorated, and I love going to work every day.
Cool. Yeah, that's awesome to hear that, and I hear that as well.
Yeah.
That it kind of almost doesn't matter that your size if you've made the decision and pull it off, and it can work only for your clients with no one else in the way. Really, there's always headaches,
Yep.
whether that's in the business or just life. But man, when you have control of the kind of your destiny, it's a big deal.
Yep.
Very good. If you had any kind of do-overs in your career personally, anything in particular you think you would do differently, or you would recommend people keep an eye out for if they're trying to avoid kind of lessons learned, so to speak?
I've been reading a lot of entrepreneurial books and self-help books and everything, and I'm very strong right now on the life is a journey and there are no mistakes.
There you go.
My knee-jerk reaction is, oh my God, going to sell insurance in 2005 was a silly thing. I didn't want to be an insurance salesman. I don't know what I was thinking. But if you look at where it got me in my career, that got me outside of Merrill Lynch. That allowed the Luminous guys to call me and say, hey, you're on the other side of the wall. You go figure this out. So that actually was the pinpoint of my career, the big turning point. So I definitely wouldn't be where I am today if I hadn't done that. So I can't really say that leaving Merrill to go sell insurance in 2005 was a regret. But I probably have the same answer all the advisors do. I wish I had done PFI sooner. I am definitely having the time of my life. And we've got the two little ones at home. I don't get a lot of sleep at night, but I haven't had one morning where I just keep hitting snooze and I can't get up and get into the office. I run into here every day. And I just think that this independent movement has so much further to go. It's exciting to be a part of.
Great. Yeah, that's kind of the same way I feel. It's great to hear other people say the similar, always a different story and how you get to that point, but it's neat to hear the same sentiment,
Yeah.
and people are fired up about what they're doing and trying to help others do the same thing. Yeah, I would assume one of the reasons you went to sell insurance, and maybe if there's more of the story you can share, but I would think one of the allures of being in the financial services business, however you get into it, is sort of the control of your destiny and independence, even as it's a insurance agent or a bottom of the barrel start new wirehouse and get first. And it's there's always that, hey, you're going to work for yourself allure.
Yes.
So in that way, I would think going to try it, at least you kind of get, I like to tell advisors, hey, even if you're not the $1 billion team yet, it's hard to get where you are, even if you're, what people would call modest producer in the big scheme of things. It's, not everyone makes it. Insurance is a tough racket. Investment sales is a tough racket. So
one of our clients at Merrill Lynch, a very successful guy, took me to lunch one day and said, everyone in their career should have to be on commission at some point just to learn what it's like to get hung up on all day long. It's a great growth trial by fire, and it really helps shape you.
Exactly. Yeah, I have two young kids. They're a little older than yours, but I start to think about things. I kind of tell my story. Hopefully they don't have to go knock on doors like I did and all that. But I don't want it to be too easy, right? Because it's then they don't appreciate it. I can see why. You read about it over and over. Families with tremendous wealth. It's not that easy to enjoy the fruits of your labor, but you usually do that with your kids around. Yes. And so try to inculcate them with the values and the hard work. And so I admire families that have been able to pull that off. It's quite an accomplishment. Well, Matt, I sure appreciate your time. How can people, if they want to learn more about what you guys do or pick your brain, how do they find you guys?
Yeah, pfiadvisors.com. And I'll just give you my phone number as well, 424-336-9751.
Cool. Well, I really appreciate the time, and I'm sure everyone will get a lot of value from this.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
There you have it. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Matt. I took one major theme at least, which is a lot of the mindset issues that we face before we go independent are the same, no matter what size and scale you are, whether it's just you working from a home office with 30 million in assets, or it's a large team with several billion in assets. Former Goldman Sachs, Merrill Lynch guys. Similar challenges trying to run the business and set up the the foundation of their own independent firm. So really fascinating to me to hear Matt's experience, and he, I think, will be a great resource for us here at How to Go Independent as we fill in the pieces of the marketplace, especially at the higher end, that I don't have direct experience in. So it's great to have made contact with him, and look forward to seeing his new venture grow. Matt also has offered to be a resource to our listeners. So if you have a successful practice, but maybe it's only a couple $100 million of assets, and you're looking to make a change, between Matt's experience at Merrill, at Focus, and his current venture, he's got a very wide range of expertise and insight into the different options out there. So I encourage you to reach out to him directly if you want to learn more, and I'm sure he would respect your privacy and confidentiality, as we all do when we're looking at career options. So with that, I will say goodbye till next time, but let me know if you have any questions or concerns, complaints at Sean@indyfa.com. Thanks, and see you next time.